So today's lab, we're conducting nerve conduction velocity. And in this particular laboratory, what we want to do is measure the speed along the ulnar nerve. And so we have a patient today, and we have our Biopack system so that we can measure the actual time that it takes for an action potential to travel along the ulnar nerve. If you can imagine trying to use a stopwatch to measure the time that it takes for an electrical signal to travel, it's not going to be possible to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure the distance that the signal travels, and we're going to just be using a simple ruler to do that. And then we're going to use the Biopack system to measure the time that it takes for the signal to travel along the ulnar nerve and trigger a muscle response. And that's how we're actually going to see that an electrical signal is taking place. So with the Biopack system, what we have set up here is we have a bar electrode. And the bar electrode is what's going to stimulate the ulnar nerve on our patient. And what it's going to do is it's going to then send a signal along the ulnar nerve, and it's going to activate the musculature in the hand. We're then going to set up a Emg Electromyogram, and that Emg is going to actually measure the muscle contraction, so we know that there's actually an electrical signal that's taken place. So we have bar electrode connected to our stimulator box, and we have our cables for recording the Emg connected directly to the Biopack system. On the computer screen, we have our Biopack software. So I'm going to go ahead and open that now, and then we'll hook up the things that we need for our patient. So we're going to double click on the Biopack Student Laboratories, and we're going to select the Pro lessons, and we're going to find Nerve Conduction as our lesson. And then I'm going to go ahead and enlarge that so we can see everything. So on the Biopack screen, what we have here is we have two recordings that we're going to take a look at. We have our stimulator recording that's going to be in the upper box, and then we have our Emg recording that's going to go in the lower box. Down at the bottom of the screen, we have our control for our stimulator. So our stimulator is what kicks out our voltage to actually activate the musculature. And so I'll be working with that to set up the experiment, and then we'll actually record the experiment once we find our stimulation points. So let's go ahead and set up the electrodes on our patient. And before we get started, I need my patient to remove any jewelry, just so that it doesn't interfere with any of the electrical signaling. And let's see here if we can get this open here. So it's going to take 3 of these electrodes, and if anything doesn't stick properly, we can tape them down. So one goes on the back of the hand, the other one the second one we're placing on the 5th phalange, and our third one is going on the medial portion of the palm. And this one's actually our most important electrode, because this is going to be our active recording electrode. So now what I'm going to do is hook up our cables for the Emg portion of the experiment. And again, just as a reminder, this is so that we can actually see that electrical signals have traveled down the nerve. Without some sort of response, we wouldn't know that anything happened. So I'm putting black on the back of the hand, red on the medial portion, and then white is going on the 5th digit. Okay. And go ahead and turn their hand over, just relax. Okay, so how's that look? Okay, go ahead and just move your hand. Okay, and we're gonna tape this one down because that one's coming off. When you're taping down the electrodes, you want to make sure that you don't actually cover any of the metal. We want to make sure that we have a good connection with the leads, but we don't want to actually cover. There we go. Don't want to actually cover the metal. Okay, good. That looks good. All right, so now we can actually start the experiment. So again, we have our bar electrode. This is connected to our stimulator, and we have our EMG set up so we can measure muscle activity. So the first thing we have to do is actually find a stimulation point on our patient that's going to give us a muscle activity. So on the Biopack screen, what we need to do is we need to change the settings. I'm going to go into preferences, and I'm going to change this to continuous stimulation, and I want to give myself control over the experiment. So now what I've done is if I click the button at the bottom of the screen, okay, and I've turned it on, okay, we can then look at the stimulator and see that the red light is flashing. So right now, because the red light is flashing, it's sending out 0.5 of a volt. Not enough volts to bring us to threshold and trigger an action potential, but there is voltage coming from the bar electrode. The bar electrode should only be held in one hand. We don't want to create a circuit across the heart that could actually trigger an arrhythmia, but we do want to have enough voltage in order to activate the nerve. Now on dry skin, doesn't really do much, okay? But since we have gel, we can increase the conduction through the skin and actually reach threshold and stimulate the nerve. So what I'm going to do here is place some gel, okay, and this is where it gets fun, okay, especially for the patient. Now you get to be involved in the process here because you're going to actually place the bar electrode in the gel. And remember to hold that in one hand, place that in the gel, and you're going to want to kind of push that into your skin, and I'm going to control the computer here, and we're going to increase the voltage. So I'm guessing you can't feel anything right now.
No.
But I'm going to go ahead and use the stimulator box, and I can increase the voltage until we get to a threshold value. When we get to threshold, we'll be able to trigger an action potential and actually start seeing some muscle contraction taking place. So I'm going to get to about 15 to 20 volts. That's usually where we can start feeling something. So how does that feel on your skin?
I can feel the voltage, but it doesn't hurt.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'm going to increase it to about 20 right now. And so what I want you to do is keep kind of turning it a little bit and see if you can get a stimulation point. Okay, so what we've done is we've found a stimulation point to trigger the ulnar nerve, and now we're getting muscle response in the hand. And this is going to allow us to actually measure the EMG on the screen. But this isn't quite enough jumping of the hand, so we definitely want to up the voltage. So we know we're at threshold because we're stimulating the nerve and we're getting muscle activity. But now we're going to go ahead and increase the voltage so that we can see a much greater response in the musculature. So you should be seeing now in the hand that tendons are moving in the wrist, the hand starting to jump, and we're probably getting more and more digits involved as well. There we go. Now we're seeing a good response. So we're at about 45 volts, 44.5, okay, and now we have a nice muscle response. So I want you to keep that in that location. I'm going to go ahead and stop this, and the handle stopped jumping, which is amazing. And now what we're going to do is we're going to change the preferences back to a single stimulus, and we're going to record it this time.